All right. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another Learning Tech Talks, where we are continuing to explore the landscape of learning. And I would expand it to workplace technology because really learning is work and work is learning if you really think about it. So I might even change my intro. We'll see. I got to spend some time on that. But anyway, today I'm joined by Josh Little. He's the founder and CEO of Volley, which we're going to get into what that is. But we're talking about reimagining communication, community, connection. I mean, we've got a hot list of words that right now are big words in the space as the whole world is kind of struggling to figure this space out. So Josh, I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for joining.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, no problem. Well, so we're going to get into it. But before we do, like we always do, those of you who can join in the comments, because it's always more fun if you do. But Josh, I've got my icebreaker questions for you so people can get to know a little bit more about you. But I'm actually changing the theme of my icebreaker questions too, which folks, you're going to kind of get this. But Josh, for you, where are you in the world today? And I won't spoil it because you've already shared this with me, but I'll let you answer that one.
Well, you can't quite see, but I'm in the mountains of Utah, and they're right out my back window here.
Okay. All right. So northern, southern part?
Well, it's considered northern, but between Salt Lake and Provo.
Okay. All right. Well, and the fascinating fun fact about that I was not aware of is I'm in Milwaukee thinking here, Josh is going to be taking in the rays and the sun and it's going to be toasty warm. But here I come to find out the weather is somewhat similar, although slightly different. But temperature wise, you said it's similar. So
it's about the same. Yeah, about temperature wise, but we get a lot more sun here. That's for sure.
Okay. All right. Well, so we got that. I'm in Milwaukee, where I always am with my friendly houseplant, Fred. So let's switch over to the next one, which is new icebreaker, not just a weird, quirky fact about Josh, but also a best practice. I'm interested to see where you go with this. So Josh, and for those of you watching, if you got a best practice, share it too. But Josh, what's your best practice for building connection and relationships in this whole new digital space?
Well, I have to call out what I'm seeing our users do every day at Volley. It's get real and drop the facade. Even though we're on a call and we're face to face today, I've got some nice leather chairs right here, and I've got this light behind that looks kind of cool behind that plant. I haven't named yet, so I've got to name it, right?
Okay.
So am I really real? Even though, yes, we're on a call, we're kind of in this spot in our little cockpit in a facade. So, this is kind of what we're trying to help people do with Volley, which is in your pocket. You can communicate from anywhere, and it's hard to not get real when you're out feeding the chickens, but moving work forward. Right.
All right. Well, so mine's actually kind of similar to that, but I think in a similar vein, it is this vulnerability and transparency. I think, like you said, this is the orientation most people know when they think of me digitally, because this is where you see me most of the time, which for me is more of a limitation of it's where my webcam and my, microphone's set up. So I would look pretty ridiculous carrying all of that around. But I think the informal piece and helping people get to know who you are on a personal level, I'm surprised how often even like my kids jumping into the shot makes people feel more connected to who I am as a person.
Yeah. Oh, you're a person. Oh, wow. Look at that.
I'm real. Although some people think I'm just a hologram. I have some folks that have never met me that are like, I don't think he's actually real, which I am. All right, let's transition the conversation over to this whole reimagining community and all of this stuff as we talk about this. And this is going to be fun because another fun fact I found out about Josh backstage is you were in the L&D space before you got into the founder entrepreneur space, correct?
That's right. Yeah, I built a couple of learning tech companies. Maestro was the first one. Bloomfire was the second one. I've been to all the trade shows, spoke at them, and know the space very well.
Okay. And you were on the practitioner side, then you went into the tech side. So
Yeah.
you've been on the dark side and the light side of the whole thing.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I was on the corporate side, and it was really, I started Maestro just kind of scratching my own itch. I wish a company existed that could just, I could take our binders and our DVDs and like make e-learning out of these things, right? And I was working with like 5 different vendors at the time, and I was like, I wish somebody could do this. So let's create a company, call it Maestro, because we're pulling together the orchestra, and we can just hand our content to them, and they can just help us perform beautifully. So yeah, that's my first entrepreneurial foray.
Okay. All right. So then you add, and you just, without going into all the details, this isn't, Volley's your 4th now, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Once you learn how to build a tech company and ride the lightning, it's just hard to go on any other ride. Really, it is. So maybe I'm a sicko. I don't know. I've tried to retire twice and just can't seem to do it. So I'm back at it. And yeah, Volley, I feel like, is my magnum opus. Just like, I want to build something big for the world and make a dent. So I waited quite a while to find the opportunity.
Well, you know what? Thomas Edison, I think it was Edison, who said there, when he was asked about how does he feel about his 1,000 failures? He said, well, there was no 1,000 failures. It was simply 1,000 attempts to get to where I was. That's a terrible butchering of the quote, but
for sure.
Yours were actually successful. You had you had success, another one. So I'm actually excited to hear.
No, if you go in the LLC records in Utah and Michigan, you'll find my name on things that I just don't talk about, but because they're not worth talking about. They never got off the ground. They never turned into a thing, bad breakups or whatever. The market wasn't there. So I only talk about my successes. And so, yeah, it does seem like it's 4 hits in a row, but yeah, there's some misses in between.
There's been some strikeouts and some, all right. I'm not good with the sports analogies, but good to know. Good to know on that one, because I think that going back to even our best practice on building relationships, I think that's actually been a really helpful one for folks, is the vulnerability of like, hey, a lot of times we posture, and I see it in L&D all the time, where we talk about, we've solved everything. Everything's working. Some of the best connections I've built with other leaders in L&D is when we talk about, man, we tried this and it was the Hindenburg thing. Went up in flames, hit the ground, scorched the earth. It was bad, type of a thing. Mm-hmm. So we kind of tied to, okay, you're at Volley. You've started Volley now, but what is it? Now, I know, because I've been playing around with it and I'm actually kind of hooked on it. I'm hooked on it, but I don't want to spoil it. So how do you describe it when people say, all right, you're in another venture, Josh, you're starting Volley? What's that?
Well, let me give my best shot here. Volley, it's a video messaging app. But then when I say that, people are like, okay, what does that mean? So it's like, it's like video. I've used this and I don't know why this works for some people. It's like video texting, and that's not actually a thing, but imagine you could text back and forth videos, right? That's the idea. So we take turns just like any other conversation, like we've taken turns in this conversation, except we record our turn with video or a volley. But that video can also be a screen record. It can be just your voice. It can be a text. It can be a file, a document, whatever you need to share your message. And by doing that, by allowing the turns to be recorded, we can make them asynchronous, which means we don't take them at the same time. I'm not listening to you while you talk and you listen to me while I talk. And by doing that, we get all of these benefits. I can listen to you on 2x. I can skip back and hear what you said 3 times and think deeply before I actually give you an answer, and not feel pressured by the 200 millisecond gap that's transcendent across all languages and cultures. I can take 20 seconds to think, 20 minutes to think, whatever the conversation dictates before I give a response, and I can give a more thoughtful response. And because I'm not looking at you, reading your body language, second guessing what I'm saying, I can be all in on my response. And so Volley is kind of a all in form of communication where you have total recall. You can put your best self forward, because you can also cancel your response and say it again, not to obsess, but to, again, put your best thought forward. And sometimes I'll do that when it takes me like 3 minutes to kind of explain something. And then I know I'm sending a Volley to my team and there's 12 people. And I'm like, I could probably say that in 1, and that would save 12 times 2. that would save 24 minutes of my team. Whoa. Okay. Let me do that. So it takes me another minute to say that again. So there's all kinds of benefits when you start to think about having conversation that is separate from place and time. We get all the richness of talking with all the flexibility of texting. So I don't know. I've said a lot of words. Does that get us in the ballpark?
I think it does get us in the ballpark. And the thing about it is, well, actually, I'm going to dig into this, but before I do, I have to ask this because, okay, so video texting, again, it doesn't fully accurately represent it. And again, we're going to kind of flesh this out and unpack it. And I would encourage people to download it and try it, because until you do it, it is hard to explain. It's like when I try and explain a VR experience to someone and you're like, well, it is experience, but it's not experience. It's different. And you kind of got to do it. But where did the idea hit you at? Because were you sending a text message going, I really wish I could do this as a video? Because where I don't think that sells it for what it is, because to that, I could send a video text message thread through my thing. It's very clunky though. It wouldn't work well. Like I could sit and record a video, but then I don't want to watch the whole video. And then now my iMessages is all clogged up. And it's not that. But where did the idea come from? Like, were you frustrated with something?
Well, that's right. So let me start where you started the question, which I think is really good. Like, yeah, I can send a video to my friend here this is iMessage on my iPhone. But if you look at the primary input method, it's a text box.
Yes.
And so when I see text and I see a text box, that's just the behavior I'm going to follow with. We can all send videos, but we don't. We can say things 7 times faster than we can type them, especially with these thumbs. So why are we texting each other, right? And when you go into Volley, you don't see a text box. You see, let me just jump into a conversation here. You see, I'm just showing you my monitor. You see a camera pointed at you and a record button below that. And there is a little text button below that. Oh, sorry. I just started playing a Volley. There's a little text button below that, but because there's a camera on you, because there's a record button, that's your primary input method. And so it feels like that's what you should do. And that's what other people are doing. So you're like, okay, well, I'll follow suit. And this is why about 60% of volleys sent are video volleys, because we can speak 7 times faster than we can type. And you get the full spectrum of the message you're trying to deliver, because only 7% of our message is the words that we choose. And we can demonstrate that by the classic example, we need to talk. Like if you send that text message, where's that going?
Believe me, I have enough people in my life that I have tried to coach or tell, like, can you not send that as a text message? Because when all I get is this phrase, call me, I need to talk, or whatever that is, you cannot read tone, you can't see you're like, did someone die? Did you find something? Like, this is gonna be bad.
You're right. But if I say, dude, we need to talk, there's no mistaking that. You heard it in my voice. That's 38% of our 100% message of the full spectrum of communication. 38% is tone of voice. 55% is what I look like when I'm saying the words I say. Only 7% is actually the words. So there's no mistaking what I said. We just did a survey of 2,000 remote workers. 99%. We should have parsed this question a little bit more. 99% said they have to clarify a written message at least once per day. And that's just insane. Like, and we're slacking our faces off all day. We're shooting emails at each other. And those are the messages that you even get a chance to clarify. What about all of the other ones that are totally misunderstood and nobody brings that up?
And nobody said anything to you and said, I totally misread this, or I was offended by it.
So there's no downside. There's no downside. If you can speak 7 times faster, and if a 10-minute email, I can just say in 1 or 2, easy, right? And you get the full spectrum of communication. There's no downside to us talking. The downside currently, if we look at the current or the traditional landscape of communication, you really only have 2 options. You can talk or you can type. If you talk, you're choosing to do something that's interruptive. If you type, you're choosing to do something that's slow. Typing, and I'm talking email, chat, asynchronous, anything asynchronous historically has been written. Anything synchronous, talking, means you're getting on a Zoom or getting a room, and there's all kinds of bad behavior there. Like, we've got to stop what we're doing, deal with technical difficulties. Like, I can't hear, is your mic on? Or like, and that's the first of every call, no matter how many we've done in a day, right?
I actually posted, yeah, no, like, you're on mute is probably the number one phrase of 2021, 2022.
No doubt. And not, let alone like the bad behavior of meetings, people talking too much, people not talking enough, meetings being a sponge. And, like, how have you ever noticed how magically a 60-minute meeting lasts about 60 minutes and a 30-minute meeting lasts about 30 minutes? Are we just that good at guessing how long it'll take to talk about things? No, we're not. The meeting is a sponge that fills the time.
It's like the text message thing. When you see the meeting 60 minutes, you're like, we need to talk for 60 minutes versus, well, let's let it be however long we need it to be.
No doubt. Yeah. And this is Parkinson's Law, that a task will take the time that you give it. It'll eat up every second of that time. And meetings are not absent from that law. So, back to the two ways to communicate. You can either talk, has downsides, or you can type, has downsides. What if you could have the richness of talking with the richness of typing or texting, right? If you could, the flexibility of texting, if you can pull those together, that's the idea of Volley. I can just say what I need to say and move on with my day. You can catch it in 5 seconds, 5 hours, whatever the urgency of our conversation or this topic or this thread needs. And that's sort of apparent. And we bump that together over time. And it turns out there's a lot of value to that. And it's actually most things that you can actually communicate in this way. Certainly not house on fire sort of things. Certainly not like super emotionally charged. Like, if you're not going to text those things either, if you're not going to text it right, you're not going to volley it. But you're not going to terminate someone over Volley. You should talk. You should get in a Zoom.
Well, that would certainly be a not best practice type of a thing. Well, but I think, and what's interesting is, so candidly, when we were planning on talking, I downloaded it to explore it, and I was like, well, we'll see. And even I was I'm big into the digital tech space. I'm like, I don't know, how much am I really going to use this? And when I started doing it, even for me, I went, wait a minute, this bridges that gap that is unbridgeable in other ways that I've experienced, which, again, a lot of times I don't talk live to people, or it's very difficult for me to, at least to talk like this, because my schedule between kids and work and all this, I don't have a lot of free time to sit and go, oh yeah, let's set up a FaceTime so I can walk around and talk to you while the house is burning or the kids are throwing cereal all around behind. I'm not going to do that. But I can find a minute or two to sneak away if there's something, oh shoot, I really want to say this to someone, or I want to share this, or this is what's going on that I need to talk about. And I would rather do that via video than text, because text is like, well, that doesn't really capture the whole essence of what I'm trying to communicate. But the ability to do that without being live is challenging. It's impossible if you're trying to do it through traditional means.
That's right. If you're trying to be efficient with your day, there's no way we can have more synchronicity in our lives. And we all feel it after the pandemic, and it's Zoom fatigue. And like, we're sort of getting used to it. Unfortunately, not me necessarily, because I have Volley and we communicate on Volley all day. We only have 2 meetings a week with our team. My calendar is just a bunch of white boxes, which is weird being a CEO, the first time ever this has happened, but I love it. I love it. And you're right. Like, I don't have time for another call. I don't have time for a lunch. But I have time for a Volley. And because you're recording yourself on a video, you're going to get to the point. There's no reason in Volley to like meander,
ramble,
which you can do on a call. You can do, because we're just used to this bad synchronous behavior. But you hit record, you're on, go. What do you got to say? People get to the point really quickly. And really there are some longer Volleys that take a little bit of time to process and get out. And I can listen to you on 2x, so I can even hit you. I can even hear you faster, because we listen to, speech.
We can listen and process things way faster than people usually talk.
Yeah. Well, and if you're rambling, I can skip forward, or if you're not, and you said something juicy, I can skip back and listen again. can kind of blur the bounds of time and space with this form of communication. It's new, so it's a wild idea, I know, but it's exciting.
Well, but I mean, going back to, so what's interesting, you brought up the Zoom fatigue thing. And what's interesting about it is I've seen that the unfortunate part with it, because it's a real thing. And I hear it from folks. I'm just tired of being on all these video conferences back to back to back. And my issue with it is I'm like, I think you're pointing at the wrong problem though.
Yeah.
You're pointing because you hear things like, well, now we're telling all our team members, turn your cameras off. And I'm like, no, don't go, just let people have their camera, which I'm like, I get why, because yes, is sitting on camera when you've got distractions and all these things, because now mentally you're not there because you're trying to make sure like, oh geez, am I looking at the camera? Am I doing, so you are distracted by, I get why that fatigue kicks in when you're just sitting in a meeting, like listening to the meeting for 45 minutes. But the responses people are taking, which is, well, let's stop using Zoom, or let's have less meetings. Let's like not connect as much. Let's turn cameras off. I'm like, you're actually going to exacerbate the problem by doing those things. But there's, and again, I've struggled to find solutions to, so then how do we allow people to be more concise, still video, still they can see you, but you get to it and you can get through it.
Yeah, the fundamental question under all of that is, do we need to talk to move work forward? And the answer is yes. The question is how much, right? Because there is a spectrum of communication from asynchronous to synchronous, and all along are different types of messages with different ways. From asynchronous, we don't need a meeting for the message of lunch is here, right? Like, I don't need video for that. Lunch is here. I don't need context. I don't need any emotion, right? So there is an asynchronous side, and there is a synchronous side that is like, hey, this is not working out. I need to let you go. We know we're going to do that synchronous, and there's all of this road in between. And somewhere along that spectrum, we're writing a Slack message. It feels, this is going to be like 3 paragraphs. Or we're writing an email. It feels too long. And then you spend an hour on it, and you're like, what am I doing? We should just talk. It's that instinct. We just need to talk that gets you on a Zoom or in a room. Unfortunately, or fortunately, there is a lot of things to talk about. There are a lot of things. And because of bad behavior in meetings, it feels like there's even more to talk about, right? So it's not, you're right. We're pointing at the wrong thing. We still need to talk to move work forward, but how can we talk in a way that's flexible, that's not interruptive, that is efficient, where I can listen to you, 1, when I have time, and 2, on 2x, and 3, take time to think before I respond. Because this is another thing we haven't talked about that's just is inescapable in any version of talking, any version of synchronicity, is this, I referred to it earlier, this 200 millisecond gap. I know you're thinking about your next question right now because you have no idea when this wild man is going to stop talking. And it could be right now. And that was an awkwardly long pause. And that was 600 milliseconds. And that's less than a second, but that feels awkward. This is across all languages, all cultures. So as someone else is talking, we're formulating our response in our mind, because there's no way we can pull it together in 200 milliseconds. Because I don't know when you're going to stop talking. And I do know if I wait longer than 200 milliseconds, you're going to think this is weird. I'm not really listening to you. I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. And you can tell you've talked to someone who is bad at this, because you can just like see it in their eyes. Like they're maybe their lips are even moving, like what they're going to say.
Right. You can literally see they're like practicing their words. They're not saying it, but they're like, okay, here we go.
This is my time. I've got a thing to say, and I don't know what you've said for the last 2 minutes, because I just have a thing to say, and I need to blurt it out right now. And so Volley just erases all of that. It just takes it all off the table, because and educational research shows this. Like, if you can give a student, if a student knows that they can have 3 seconds to think about an answer before they say it, and they can't say it before 3 seconds, they come up with a fundamentally better response in just 3 seconds, because the pressure's off, and I can fully absorb what you're saying. I can take the 3 seconds, which feels like forever, and I can respond. And that's the beauty of Volley. There's no way I can describe that to you, like by showing you screenshots. There's no way I can like talk about the technology to show you these benefits, but it's massive.
Yeah. Well, and I don't doubt it. And again, for folks, I mean, I know I've got some of my regular folks. I was pretty stoked because I went in there and I actually landed the actual, I'm Christopher on Volley, like talk.volley.app/Christopher. I'm the only Christopher on Volley, or the only one who's claimed their vanity URL, which I'm pretty stoked about, by the way. But I do think your point about that is really important. And I think sometimes where it can feel, so I'm introverted, which a lot of people are like, no, you're not. And I'm like, no, actually, I really am. I've just learned how to kind of cope with it in a world that doesn't necessarily work well for introverts. But I think there is a lot of opportunity. Some of the things you hit on really do make a difference when you think about some of the things where you're looking for input on something. And in a traditional meeting, that bad behavior of, all right, I'm going to ask this question to the group, share your thoughts. Nobody wants to fill that awkward silence. So whoever talks first, boom, like they dominate the conversation. And chances are they're going to be the one that kind of steers it. And the person that needs time to think or needs to gather their thoughts on, oh, shoot. Well, now you've missed it, because in that live meeting, it's like, well, we're over that question. We're past it. And then again, the introverted tendency is like, well, I don't really want to disrupt, what's been going on, so I'm not going to bring it back up. We've kind of moved on. And you miss out on so many opportunities with that live component.
That's right. Extroverts reign supreme in synchronous world, right? They do. And introverts like me sit in the class stone silent and in a meeting. And I'm the same way. I present as an extrovert, but wildly, like, more introverted than all my engineers at my last company. This form of communication is because it's not that introverts don't have something to say. They care deeply about what they say. And when they say something, they want it to be thoughtful, the right thing. And it takes a little bit of time for them to put that together. I don't know how many meetings I've walked out the door of, and I'm like, that's it. Oh, hold on. Go back in the room. I can't think of it when you're staring at me. I can't pull it together. I don't know. That's why I'm terrible around a whiteboard. I don't know. I can facilitate well, but the ideas aren't flowing because I'm not in a space, and I don't need hours. I just need seconds, maybe minutes to process, to go deep, and to come back with something that actually is valuable. But the synchronous world does not lend itself to those sorts of things. So if you can level the playing field, where everyone has an equal opportunity to hit the record button, now we've got something. Now we've got something that extroverts, they can go. If you want, they can
do it. Go ahead. Throw yourself
5
out
minutes.
there.
Go ahead. 5 minutes is two and a half, and I'm going to skip forward because of the stuff that you're rambling on, right? And then the introvert can hit the record button at the exact same time and not interrupt, but come right behind in the timeline, because I don't know if Volley is kind of built on this timeline notion. We're all taking turns, and so each turn in that timeline is called a Volley. It looks like little tiles or little
they're little tiles along the bottom of the screen. You got the video, and then you can see everyone else's Volley that you can go back to.
Yep, that's right. And Volley stick around for 60 days, so we can go back and see what did you actually promise back a month ago, so for better or for worse, they stick around, but they're ephemeral.
So one thing I was going to kind of talk about on this piece, because I can see where, and again, in the learning industry, sometimes we have a bad tendency to do this, where we can go, well, okay, this is the thing, we're all chips in. Everything is this now. So we're going to go gangbusters on this. And you mentioned this earlier, but it just popped back based on something you were saying, where it's about thinking about what are we trying to accomplish and what are those things in our communication? Because like you said, lunch is here. I mean, you could do it as a Volley, I guess, but is it going to get the quick response? And I don't really need to communicate anything. I'm trying to notify you more than anything else. I need to notify you that this has happened. Versus, okay, is there time for a live meeting? Well, Yeah, but think about, what are you trying to accomplish, and does that have to happen? And then there's this in between where you say, well, this communication component is important, but all these other factors, do we really need to command that live time? And I think that's an important part, because even I could see somebody using Volley not inappropriately, like, well, I suppose that could happen too. But
Sure.
but again, if you're not thinking with intention, you might use it and go, well, this just didn't really work for that. And it's like, well, you might have been using it wrong.
That's right. Yeah, we actually came to market and I wrote a bunch of content like filling the space between Slack and Zoom. And people are like, well, I didn't even know a space existed. We just kind of butt those things up. No, yeah, there is this space. And so that was our idea. And Volley's the end of meetings as we know it and whatnot. But what we learned actually was if you actually want Volley to solve the problem you want it to, which is like increased connection with your team,
Yeah.
better communication and reduce meetings, it can't be like a third car, like a hobby car that sits in your garage filling some space that you're not exactly sure where. It actually has to be your daily driver. You've got to replace Slack with Volley in order to see those benefits. Because if it is if your primary input method at the bottom of Slack is a text box, guess what? That's what you're going to do.
Put text.
And Slack has this new clips functionality, and yeah, it's used, but it's the exception, not the rule, right?
Well, and I think that goes back to, I don't think that can be understated, how some of, and this ties for learning practitioners. Again, I think this is an important factor to consider when you're thinking of tech in general, is the fact that you can add functionality to something, but that doesn't necessarily mean user behavior is going to adopt that. Because if the UX is not designed around it, or the intention is not there, you may have this capability. And I've seen it with tech implementations all the time, where it's like, oh, it has this feature. And it's like, well, right, but it's buried, or the primary workflow is this. And yeah, you can bolt on this random thing over here that technically can do it, but nobody uses it that way.
Yep.
Because that's not how it was ever intended to be used. So that, I think, is an important factor to consider, because you can miss out on things, whether it's Volley or whether it's texting, whether it's your LMS, whatever those things are. Like, I've heard LMSs say, oh, we're a social learning platform. Really?
Right.
How? Oh, well, there's this like separate area in the thing you can go and create conversation threads. Right. For all the people who are just chilling in the LMS thinking like,
Right.
hey, you know what I want to do is like start a conversation with people. That's not the user behavior of how they're using the tool.
That's right. Yeah. And this is what I got wrong with Bloomfire. Yes, people needed to share knowledge with each other. And yes, they would need to do that with video, text, screen records. So I got all that right. But in a different place, that was wrong, because nobody's going to go there. It's a different place. And that's what I feel like I'm getting right with Volley. No, it's got to be the place that you communicate. It's got to be, you're making content through conversation. That's where this content is coming from. So let's make the place that we make this content shareable, savable, and be able to pull this together. And having been a sales rep in the field myself, like, I've got a new problem every day. Like the wheel's broken on this cart. The camera doesn't switch just right. The batteries aren't initializing in this instrument, like in the medical world. And man, if I could just flip my camera around and just say, hey, anybody ever have this happen? And have 3 answers in 10 seconds, like what? That would be unreal. But if it's a whole different island that you've got to like fly to go make that content and expect people to fly there and see you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's got to be your daily driver. And that's the challenge, is like the network effects of Slack are strong. And that's what we found. There's only a handful of companies that are really willing and ready to live this higher law and communicate better and be more comfortable with video and put themselves out there, which this communication method really requires.
Yeah. Well, and on that, as you kind of talked about some of the examples of organizations and what they're doing with it, I mentioned it in the new intro, not new intro, but where I kind of commented on the lines are blurring between learning tech and workplace tech, because realistically, It's like, really, what's the difference? And that's where, when we first connected, I said, well, yeah, some people might go, learning tech talks. Like, I don't quite understand. Well, but if you're working, if you're communicating, learning is part of that process. So the example even you gave, where you go, I have a question on something, I could text and try and send a picture or whatever and try and hope but then I got to know who to text and make sure, oh, now I got a group text, and then people hate those because their phone's blowing up left and right with notifications. And it's like, well, but that is learning, because I'm trying to solve a problem. I'm trying to figure out what to do, and I don't know how, and I need to ask for help. And that social connective tissue, I will say organizations and the workforce are struggling with that tremendously right now.
Absolutely. And that's kind of the opportunity I saw, when the pandemic hit, and it was like, I know what the world needs, a better way to communicate. And that's what we've kind of been in pursuit from. But I'll be honest, it's been surprising how few people in the workforce are ready to actually be seen and are more interested in hiding at work. And I know we talked about this a little bit before, and it seems crazy for me to say something like that in a podcast that's public about a product that I'm creating, but it is a cultural thing that we're, I don't know, are we really? I can hide behind a Slack message. I can think about it for 10 minutes before I send. I can get my bullet point I can get the perfect emoji on that Slack message. And you mentioned earlier, I can leave my camera off on Zoom, and I can sit quiet, and I can just take my opportunity to make a cheap shot whenever I need to. So we are by and large still able to hide at work. But Volley, you hit record, you're on. If you don't have something to say, it's going to freak you out. And that's what we've seen over and over. We've had thousands of companies adopt Volley, and it's great. And there are many of them using it for sure. I thought it would be way, way more producible. I thought more people were going to be ready for something like this, but it seems like I'm shooting myself in the foot, but what I'm pointing at is like, there's a big thing that's in our way of getting to the future that we want. If we want a future that's more balanced, that's more flexible, there's no way we're going to get there with the current set of tools. And Simon Sinek said, by the way, everyone, this is only working because we knew each other when the pandemic hit. We're living on borrowed time. The existing relationships are what are carrying us. Now add someone new in this current environment of hiding and Slack and Zoom. It's hard to get connected. And this is like 94% of people in that last survey, that I mentioned, 2,000 remote workers, 94% of people said onboarding was exponentially harder than in a remote company than it would be, in something live, or not live, but in on premise.
No, something on prem, or whatever we want to call it. But I think, what's interesting about this, and this maybe we shift the discussion here a little bit, because I do think talking about this and kind of punching it on the nose a bit is important, because it's really the only way you can solve for it. And I think one of the things that was interesting about when the pandemic hit and people kind of pulled into a different world was, I don't think we realized how much we took for granted and how much we didn't realize what actually went into something. You were like, oh yeah, we've got a relationship. And you're like, but first of all, do you really? Or is it nothing more than like, well, we happen to incidentally bump into each other, so I guess I would recognize you, but give me the opportunity and I would avoid you at all costs type of a thing. But then there also was this whole, okay, but do you know what actually makes the strength of the relationship stronger with this person than the other person? Have you actually thought about why that matters? And I think, again, I continue to see some of the areas people are struggling and going, but you also don't want to do the very thing that is going to help fix it.
For sure. It happens sort of naturally when we are in an office together. And when those things were taken away, you're right. I think there was a rug pull. We didn't realize how much actually bumping into each other in the hall or around the water cooler or going to lunch together or talking about that thing in the parking lot actually meant to us. And that was the foundation of relationship. We don't build relationships in meetings necessarily. We talk about work, but where we get to know each other as humans and really make true connections is everything in between. And when that's taken away, work feels different. I feel less connected to my team. This is why people are switching, and it's easy to move, and there's a war for talent, and it's hard to hold on to people unless you can feel connected. And that's why, Volley sort of solves that problem, because there's no way to not feel connected. If now you can move work forward from anywhere, and I can be in a coffee shop, or I can be walking the dog, or making my protein pancakes at lunch, and I can listen to the conversation and like chime in while I'm flipping my pancakes. And you're going to see my kitchen. You're going to see that I'm eating protein pancakes. You're going to wonder, why would you eat something like that? And are they good? And what's the recipe? Right. And now you understand, like, I'm in this weight loss competition, and like, there's the humanity. We're not getting to that in a meeting. We're not going there. It's not going to happen. But if you see me outside, you have chickens? Oh, don't you live in a city? How do you have chickens? And okay, so now there's a whole different side of me. There's a whole different side of the person. And that's why I said earlier, the where we need to go, the way to connection is not spending more time eyeball to eyeball in a Zoom. It's just getting real. It's just dropping the Zoom. It's dropping this facade, and like just communicating and not obsessing about that, and being vulnerable, as you said earlier, that I think is the path toward the future.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting about it is I hear this rear its head when you'll hear the comment that sometimes will come up is, well, I just feel like there's something missing. But people struggle to articulate what it is. We just need to get together in person because there's just something missing. And you're like, what? Can you articulate that? And again, even a live meeting, bring everybody together. It might give you that little bit of an endorphin rush when you're like, yeah, it was really fun. We sat around and kind of bumped elbows, and you're like, okay. But I mean, I've seen enough in-person training to know that's not what shows up on the, feedback card. Yeah. Oh yeah, sitting in the room together, admiring each other's button-down shirts. No, it wasn't that. It was, oh, did you see, what they wore when we went out for drinks afterwards, or the stories that I heard, that kind of stuff, where you go, well, see, those little details are the things that matter. And I think just even of your example with like the protein pancakes, I had a leader once that started sending, when the pandemic hit, he was trying to figure out how to connect with his team. And so every day between lunch and whatever, he would take a picture of something he was doing not related to work and send it to his team. Just something unrelated, like, oh, I'm out, and I don't think he had chickens, but he had something else. And one day he was making a pie, and he saw the dynamics of the team change within. There was a early stage where people were like, it kind of feels fake. But then when they saw it, like, no, this is real. Like, this is who this leader is all the time. The trust, the vulnerability, the willingness to take risks, the innovation started to follow, because they started going like, wow, I know who this, and then other people started joining because they're like, well, I can do that. Like, I can respond. I saw something. And some of those subtle details that you can't capture really make a big difference.
They do. And they come through, and it's hard to get them in the existing stack. And that's why, like, if the future of work, if you really want it to be flexible, if you want to be in a coffee shop, dropping off your kids, taking the walk, at an office, and then, back at home, if we want that flexibility, there's no way we're going to get there without a communication tool that is a shapeshifter, that is speech to text, text to speech, and all the way around. And that's kind of what we're trying to get to. All volleys are transcribed. So if you're in a quiet place or in a place that's noisy, you're not going to be able to listen to a volley unless you got earpods. So you can just view the transcript and scroll through, and then, write a text volley back maybe. So you need that flexibility that you can shift back and forth in those things. But you're right. If 60% of your volleys sent are, you're going to see where I'm walking. You're going to see I live in the mountains. You're going to see, oh, I live next to a horse pasture. You're just going to see those things. And it doesn't take a lot. Even if we are, in a meeting or in some conference room together, It's not us sitting together at the table that's going to make the connection. It's when we went to get the sandwich, and I said something about ham and made a joke, and that was it. And then suddenly we're connected somehow. And then later that night, we're gonna stroll around the city together and figure something out. This is kind of, conferences, what ends up happening. It's very small things. It's very small elbow bumping in the hallway sort of interactions that make a quick connection that really builds the relationship. And if we believe that, culture is like the basis of our culture is communication, then how we're communicating is our culture. It's how we're going to behave. So communicate that you want to be, I guess. I don't know. I was trying to pull that together.
No. But it did, because I think, one of the things, and this goes back to as people are making digital transformations, one of the things I'm always trying to push them to think about is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Like at a granular level, break this down. So even the comment that kind of sparked something for me was when you said, and you'll hear it, people are like, well, it's just good to bump elbows with people. And it's like, why? Don't stop at the bump elbows, because that's how you make incomplete decisions where you go, you know what the solution is? We got to stuff people in a room more, because that's how you bump elbows. And you're like, that's not the problem though. Why does bumping elbows create this? And then you ask those questions like, because when that happened, then they mentioned this, and that made me think of this. And then and you're like, see, it had nothing to do with the actual physical proximity. It had to do with what was underneath all of that, which once you tear that back, then you can start solving for things in a different way. Cause you go, okay, we can recreate that. The person that you just said, like, they ordered a ham sandwich, and that sparked a conversation because you're like, oh, I don't eat ham. Like, why don't you eat ham? Type of a thing. Well, you can recreate that. Your protein pancakes. Well, why protein pancakes? Why are you eating protein pancakes?
Gross.
Suddenly now I have another gross. Like, don't those taste like nasty? No, these are really good. That then starts to create these other elements that are what's underneath all of this that we've taken for granted, and we've assumed, well, it was this or that, and that's where it came from. And it's like, no, actually it wasn't at all.
Yeah, that it's the foundation of relationship, right? It's how we build those that is what we're truly after. And you're right, it is all the things in between, it seems, that we're getting there. So I love it.
So how do you, I'm curious, because now you're seeing all these folks who are starting to do this or starting to kind of figure this out. In theory, it's like, okay, super easy. Yeah, we'll just do this. But we even talked about in the beginning, for some people, it's like the first time they've ever recorded a video of themselves. And it's like, oh, right? Like, I didn't realize I looked like that, or, oh, I don't really like, the way my lack of hair shows up, or the shine. How do you help, or how have you seen people get over that? Because that is a real barrier. I see it with social learning initiatives. I see it with video. I see it with all these things where people go, I get it, but like, I don't know how I feel about it. How have you seen people overcome it?
Well, a number of things. And to just back up your point, like I'm because every user gets a conversation with the Volley team, we're seeing users every day who are like recording the first video they've ever recorded of themselves. And when we started building Volley, I assumed tools like Snapchat and Marco Polo were just ubiquitous. Everyone's used them. Everyone's made videos of themselves with funny rabbit noses or whatever, right? But no, it's like crazy how few people have actually used tools like that or made a video of themselves. Now they've made videos of other people on vacation and shots and whatever, and they've got pictures of themselves, but a video of yourself talking, there's very few people that have actually done this. We're seeing the 90-10-1 creator consumer play out, and so it freaks people out. From the first time, they're like, I feel like I'm talking to myself and I'm looking at myself. I don't know if I like the way that I look. Can I turn the camera off? Can I look at something else? Can I? And we're like, well, no, this would be literally the first camera app that you wouldn't look at yourself while you're making a video or looking at the thing that you're making a video. But it takes a little bit of time to understand, to get to that aha moment. So we've had engineers join our team with kind of the same thing, like, oh, I don't know if I want to like this. right? Because we use Volley pretty heavily in our team, and it takes about 2 weeks, is what I see. It takes about 2 weeks to get to that aha moment. And at first it's going to feel weird, feel like you're talking to yourself, but then you're going to see those things that I started to mention. You start to see like, oh, I can just say what I want to say. Or I can just ask a question whenever I have it. And I'm not tapping someone on the shoulder, because that's interruptive. And I don't want to do that, but I do want to say this thing and I don't want to type it. Right. That's right. And I was able to think for a few seconds about the thing. So I did come up with a better response, and then I canceled it because I actually come up with an even better response. And you don't even have to hear the first one and my meandering to get to this one. And all of those little things that those superpowers that Volley affords. And I'm listening to people, I'm listening to stand up on 2X, and I know exactly what Parker's doing, so I'm going to skip his, and all of those things that you just can't do in real time. You just can't do in synchronicity, and then the light bulb comes on. It's like, okay, this is better. This is better. And that happened with me as well. Just like, yes, this is a better conversation. And so now when somebody calls me, I'm like, I know this is going to be 45 minutes and I don't know time. Mom, I love you, but just volley me. No, I'm just kidding. I'll take a call from you, Mom, anytime.
So there's two things that came up as you mentioned that just kind of brought to mind something. Is one, the barriers are real, and I do think it's important, whether it's Volley, whether it's anything else, when it comes to video communication. I think that point of recognizing most people haven't. That is an assumption I have seen in I don't know how many brainstorming sessions, with companies and L&D leaders I've been with, where it's like, well, everybody's got a phone, everybody's got a camera. This is great. We've got the whole infrastructure we need with this. And it's like, but there's two barriers. One, they may not have done it, because I even think of, okay, maybe people have recorded a video of themselves or done some snap things, but sharing it. That to me, I just even think of people I know where if you look through their phone, the number of like maybe selfies or things they have, but it's like, do you post these anywhere? Well, no, I would never. Yeah, I would never share this. Right. And it's like, okay, so we're not only asking people to do something they may not have done or may be uncomfortable with, but we're asking them to share it. And so we need to recognize with anything like that, that is there's a change curve. But there's hope. And I think that's interesting to hear with the volume of data and people you see doing this. That it's like, there's hope. You just got to get them doing it. And within a little bit, once they experience, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. All right, I think I can handle this. This isn't as scary and overwhelming as I thought, which is true of any skill.
Right. Yeah. And there are high stakes at work. Like there still are. And that's probably not going to go away. So it's going to take a while for the world to get comfortable with something like Volley. However, what's really interesting is while we have thousands of teams using Volley, and that's cool, what's blowing our minds is how fast Volley's growing for other use cases like community or coaching. And those, so community leaders and coaches are grabbing a hold of Volley and like dwarfing any team that's using Volley in terms of activity and how it's working. And what's interesting about that is we're seeing all these YouTube creators jump in, because community platforms by and large kind of suck in they basically are just ripoffs of a Facebook feed, like, all the others. So if you want to post at your community, there's a bunch of tools you can use. Patreon, Gumroad, Circle, whatever. But if you want to actually talk with your community and have like a real connection and be face-to-face, there's kind of only one thing that does that well. And you can create spaces in Volley, and kind of the way that we've built it for teams works well for our communities as well. So we're seeing that take off, and the difference of dynamic there, especially a YouTuber, like, they're comfortable with video. They know what to do when a record button is pressed, and they're comfortable putting themselves out there. And unlike the team use case, they don't need everyone in the community to requite. They don't need everyone to like follow suit. It's okay to lurk. It's okay to write a text Volley with a question, as long as that community leader and the thought leader in that space can show up, and be seen. Everyone gets the value. With the community leader was able to say something, they would have typed in Discord, and that would have taken them 3 minutes. And
Yeah.
and so they get a speed benefit, and then everyone on the other side gets to see that person, that the harmonica player, the watercolor painter, whoever it is they're in the community with. They get to like see them and see they answered my question. It feels 10x different. Like, yeah, maybe that was Stephanie that wrote that reply, but that could have been Stephanie's admin, honestly. But if I ask a question and Stephanie actually responds to me, I just talked with Stephanie, this thought leader, this personality. So that's really working with Volley. So
Okay.
I think we'll get back around to Teams, because I know we're right. That instinct was right. On paper, Teams need something like this for collaboration.
The workforce needs
in the meantime, the workforce needs it. But in the meantime, we've got coaches and tons of communities that are like dying on the vine, that are just looking for something with life that can help retain their members and their users. And looks like we built just the thing for them. So that's the fun we're having right now, being parts of all these communities with our users.
Okay. Well, there's about 3 other directions I would like to go with this, but we're going to run out of time before I would even be able to unpack it. So I think, for me, as I just kind of reflect on our conversation, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to think about the fray in between there. And again, it's a fray I think a lot of people don't realize exists. They're like, well, there's text or live talk, or there's getting together, live. Like there's kind of just this spectrum, and people are like, well, but there's really nothing in between. And I think that's one of the benefits technology has allowed us, is to say, actually, there's actually a better way to do some of these things than there were before.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if we're talking about technology serving our communication, all technology has really done to date is make what we were doing analog digital. So we were writing letters. Okay, so now we can write emails. Okay, now we can write short emails, and it's called chat, right? And and we were talking in rooms or caves, right? Like, okay, now you can make a cave and it's called Zoom. Now you're in a room and it's called Zoom. So technology has only let us do what existed digitally before. I think we're now ready to allow technology to actually give us superpowers, to make us better, to make us faster, to make us more thoughtful, and show up as our best selves. And I think that's the next evolution. And I hope to be on the forefront of that. Hopefully what we're doing is getting us there.
I like I said, I love it. I use it. I've found it to fit that fray very, very well. And I think, to kind of close it out, that point you made of, as people are looking at technology, I think sometimes there's this tendency to just kind of iterate or move things from one box to the other. Like, well, we used to meet in meetings in a conference room. Yeah. So now we do it in Zoom. And you're like, well, but we kind of hated meetings when they were in a conference room. Why did we think that throwing them in a Zoom room was going to suddenly change things? It's like, well, let's rethink what really was going on in a meeting, and how might we actually deconstruct it and say, well, who says we have to have meetings like we used to have meetings? Who says we can't completely rethink what that looks like? So, well, I appreciate you joining me, Josh, and I volleyed you. We volleyed back and forth. You got to know my bamboo garden downstairs.
Yeah.
And
you're allegedly bamboo garden, right? Allegedly.
Well, that's yeah. We won't talk about that on the show. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thanks everybody for watching and joining the conversation. Appreciate it. And we will see you next week, Josh. Let's stay in touch. We'll definitely, I'm curious to see how the journey continues progressing with what you're doing.
Right on. I'm excited.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody.